Okay, well, good morning. Again, my name is Sue Baker. We got Mike Shannon and then Susan Phillips. And we're here to talk a little bit about the role of the chair and vice chair. And so advance, what do we do? I have no idea why that came. Got your attention. Hello. The 9:30 stretch. So at your first meeting, you'll pick the chair and you'll pick the vice chair. And so how you do that, there's a couple of different ways. I know for my town boards, we have the secretary run the meeting, do the Pledge of Allegiance, approve the agenda, and then immediately get to the appointment of the chair. Once that happens, they hand the gavel over to the new chair. So you could do it a couple of different ways. Other people do it with the old chair runs it until it goes, or the most seasoned person on the panel runs it until you go. So that's your call. But at your first meeting, one of the first things you'll do is pick the chair. The only exception is the person who was the chair prior cannot be chair again, and that's a state law. That's not our rule. That's a state law. So when you pick that chair, here is the thing. Seasoned chairs are cool. The meetings run great. They've done it. They know it. Okay, that can't happen because the person who was chair last can't. So some people ping pong back and forth. But a new idea would be bring in some of the other members who've never held the chair role and give them the chance. And so for some of those, if you're brand new to the board, I get you want to sit it out and see how it's going. You've never even maybe attended a town board before, and now here you are sitting in this seat being trained, and their first meeting, what? I'm not going to be chair. Okay, that's cool. You don't need to do that. But there's some people who've been on that board before who have not held that role, and we encourage you to consider taking that role on, because really, those seasoned chairs only got seasoned by experience. And so if you don't jump in and do it, you're never going to get the chance. And, we pay you so well, right? So, but one of the actual true benefits then is that you get to learn how to run a board and manage people. And so it's sort of like a free skill set that you would develop as part of this wonderfully paid position. So just a thought that it's like, oh, we know John and Susan always go back and forth. It doesn't have to be that way. Let's expand. So think about that. So the chair, this is the role of the chair, really is to facilitate the entire meeting. And when there's a short agenda and everything is running cool, it's pretty easy to do. But as Megan pointed out with her videos, things can get out of control real quick. The biggest thing we want to remind you of is the fact that all 5 members or 3 members sitting on that board are appointed by the county commissioner. And so, yeah, it's your town, it's your little community, you know what's going on, but it all got real when you guys did the oath of office, right? I mean, it's an important position, and you are an extension of the county. And so we always want to be mindful of that. And most important for the chair when they're running the meeting to know, hey, it's my responsibility to make sure that the meeting ran well. And it's also not only just the role of the chair, but any board member. You know what? I've been in a meeting where I'm supposed to run, and I'm so involved in what happened, I don't realize I've let these people talk too long, or this isn't, we got a little off topic. And so while the chair is running the meeting, any member help out. We're all humans. Sometimes things can get a little off. And so another member, feel free to bring it back so that we stay on track. So the biggest responsibility, that open meeting law, we're going to get in depth a little later with the district attorney with regard to the whys and the hows, but everybody can understand the fact that this is a public hearing. Many of the residents are going to get that postcard, and they're going to come to your town board. They're not going to go to the Planning Commission. They're not going to go to the Board of County Commission. They're going to come to the local level. You're going to see more residents coming to speak for or against an item at your meeting than we're ever going to see at the Planning Commission or Board of County Commission. And so it's really vital that the chair conduct the meeting so that no matter who you are, the applicant or the neighbor, whether you're for or against, once you left the meeting, maybe you didn't like the outcome, but you felt like you were heard and it was fair and it wasn't biased. And so I can say, I'm going to pick on Lone Mountain, there have definitely been times when somebody comes in, okay, 5 buildings with no building permits, 0 setbacks, don't even match the primary residence at all. They come unprepared, and it's like, you want to start the meeting like with, really? Really? And you think, oh, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission, and we're just going to let this go. And you sort of like want to let the person know right up front, we're not very happy with you. But you have to be careful to make sure that when they left, they didn't feel intimidated and they felt that they were heard. And sometimes that's a real challenge. But again, that's the role of the chair. So be very mindful of that. It's easy to give an opinion, but best to make sure that when everybody leaves, they understand they were heard. That was another thing that we talked about, and Megan touched on it, as far as a seasoned presenter, a lobbyist, or an engineer that's done this repeatedly for somebody else. They probably come up and they are prepared, and they go over everything very carefully. The way we do the public hearing, you have the applicant come forward and give their presentation, and then you open it up for the public hearing and let each person come up and present their position for or against, or maybe ask questions. So one of the things that came up is, if an applicant came forward and presented, but they really didn't give the whole picture, is it appropriate for one of the members or the chair to coax them, like ask questions and bring things out? So yes, before you open up the public hearing, it's okay for one of the board members to ask a few questions so that the whole picture is painted before we take the public comment. But you have to be really careful when you're asking those questions that it's just to clarify and give the whole picture and not taint your position at the very beginning before you open it up for public comment, because somebody in the audience that's never been there before and they're hearing a board member grill somebody that's presenting, and they can get the feeling of whether they're for or against the application, they may then feel intimidated. Oh, I'm against the application, but it sounds like from the questions they're asking, they're for it. I'm a little afraid to stand up, or vice versa. So you gotta be careful about that. Again, as the chair, making sure everybody feels that they had the chance to be heard and they weren't intimidated by it. And at this point, I'm turning it over to Mr. Shannon.
Okay, so I get here today thinking I can coast a little bit. I'm just going to drink coffee, don't have anything to do. And of course, they approach me and say, Mike, we want to give you a microphone, and you pitch in for your colleague that's not here, thinking that that'd be a tough thing. Those of you that have been around me enough know you're going to give me a microphone and ask me if I'm willing to stand up and talk to people that have to sit in chairs. Of course, I'm going to do it. So, but the one thing that I'm going to take some liberty with, being that I am the elder statesman with this, is that from all the liaisons, we want to thank you. Those that have been on the boards for many, many years, you know that what town boards and citizen advisory councils are today to what they were 20 years ago, it's light years. It's light years in how we approach things and work with you, but it's light years in how you guys have run your meetings and how they're viewed by the public and how they're viewed by the commissioners. And so if those of you that are leaving today, please leave knowing that you're involved with something that we see as ultra professional from where it's been from years, and that's a credit to all those people that are currently on the board, and we have new people. The other thing is that this is somewhat emblematic of our expectations of you on the board, in that I'm joking about me, I didn't plan to be doing anything today. We all pitch in as liaisons, we all work together. We talk about the chair and the vice chair, but don't think for a minute, and Sue touched on it for a second ago, that at some point, don't think that maybe one of you may have to jump into that role, because we all have families, we all have jobs, people get sick, and so don't get too comfortable as just a member of the board or the council thinking that, well, the chair's got this, because something's going to happen that you may have to jump into that role and be prepared for that. And that the thing about it with the chair is that they truly kind of develop that culture for you. And I know that there are a number of people that, Sue's a good example, that was at the other side of the table for many years. I know at Enterprise in Spring Valley as well. And your roles change. When you come on the other side of the table and become a board member, certainly there's still things that you want to feel strongly about and advocate about, but the prism that you then start to look at things is through a board member. And I have to compliment those at Enterprise in Spring Valley for years and years that have played both those sides and have done a terrific job stepping into that, and it's not easy. But make sure, as far as when you're going forward with those, in spite of what you may have personally, and you may have had history with somebody in the community and something that you may have fought against as an advocate for your neighborhood, and now you're in that role as a board member, that you make sure, and it was touched upon earlier, Steve Swikert, I'm sure will talk about it, that everybody gets that fair, unbiased hearing. It was also mentioned that you're going to have the lawyers that are trained, and they do this every night, and we may have a 2 or 3 minute time period that people are to speak. You have to use your judgment. You know when somebody may be struggling, it may be their first time. It's okay to give them a little bit of time, but you're the one that at the end of those presentations, that when you're making the recommendations, that you make sure that they're clear, and enforceable. And it's one of those things. I can use Enterprise because I know one of the things that Enterprise does is that they will look at the recommendations by staff and then build upon those recommendations. Maybe they're changing a time period, but they're referencing back to those. And I think, speaking from Carmen, who's a secretary for both Enterprise and Spring Valley, that helps the secretary to be very specific as they're referencing what are those conditions. And anybody that has seen any of the BCC meetings over the last several years, you will see at the beginning of the meeting, even on things that are on the consent agenda, they will read in sometimes on consent per the town board or on consent per the Citizens Advisory Committee, rather than just saying that this is a consent agenda and approved, because if it's not specified, then it's going to be per what staff conditions are. So the more specific that you can be with any recommendations that you have, not only helps the secretaries, but it'll help staff, as that then when they go back in and they're briefing the commissioners. And the thing to keep in mind is that for years and years there was a strong belief that, are the commissioners getting the information? The commissioners get recommendation sheets. The commissioners get minutes from meetings. Commissioners get reports from town advisory boards. Commissioner gets emails sometimes from board members. They are getting the information. So the better and the more specific your recommendations are, that's how those things then, even on an item that may be on consent, and it may be something that maybe the board isn't totally in unison on, but if you can be real specific, that's when you'll see some of those things that will roll in and be specified rather than just conditions that staff may have came up with. So that's a big thing from my perspective of what I've seen over the years, and you guys have been handling it terrific. The recommendation sheets, I've seen it where sometimes the chairs have helped in the past. Most of the time it falls on the secretaries to do that. And those of you that have tried to do both and run a meeting, it's difficult. And so sometimes if if you're not working closely with the secretary, what comes off on the recommendation sheets, which are sent in right away, that evening, the next day, sometimes if you're not making sure that things are matching up, that can get confusing if your minutes are a little bit different than your recommendation sheets as well. And so that's a real important thing to make sure that you're working on that with the recommendation sheets. And then the other thing is in regard to announcing to the applicant and the audience the next steps. You'll see a lot of times that there'll be people that are coming that are new to the process, and that even the neighbors that are there, and not knowing that this is not the end of the road. And I say this numerous times I've been up here, embrace what you are. We're going to see football games this weekend that are going to be a mixture of old KG veterans and rookies, and that mixture is what I believe makes those teams stronger. We got KG veterans on a number of these boards, but we're bringing in some new people that can add to the boards. And I say that in that the chair is going to run those meetings, and more often than not, sometimes the new people tend to sit back, and it's okay to learn. But the only way that you're going to feel comfortable is to jump in and to get going with that. And I got off track with my thoughts in regards to what I wanted to get at with the audience, as people not knowing the next steps, is that understand there are 2 weeks many times between your meeting and when it would go to the Planning Commission or go on to the Board of County Commissioners. That has been put into place in a way that allows you to take some extra time when's needed. And that's the beauty, and from my perspective, with the town boards and the citizen advisory councils, is that everything's not perfect. Everybody doesn't always agree. There are times that things need to be tweaked. And the real benefit that you can be to the Board of County Commissioners and to the Planning Commission is not to stomp on ideas, not to because it's something that you feel so strongly personal about that you want to stop it. It's to try to get that discourse going between those neighbors that live in the area, the applicant, the owner of a particular property, and try to work to massage things during that time period before they get to the Board of County Commissioners and the Planning Commission. You'll see those of you that are new, you'll probably see some of the board members that have been around for a while specifically ask applicants, would you be willing to hold this item for a couple weeks in order to work with the people that are here tonight and try to work out some of these things? Not only is that acceptable, it's something that we feel strongly is helpful to people. And so when you start to see those things, rather than feeling that, oh, we got to make that recommendation tonight, your job as an advisory board is to make those recommendation and advise on up the chain, so to speak. If you can then slow things down a bit in order to work with them, and the only caution I would have is that you have your town advisory board meeting, you have your citizens advisory council meeting, you set up a neighborhood meeting, usually working with the liaison and representatives from a neighborhood. It is now called a neighborhood meeting. It's not your meeting anymore. You may want to participate. We'd certainly caution about going in with a quorum or anything of that nature, but that there are times that it may be directly in your neighborhood, but if you are setting those up, is that you go as an observer and you're listening, because it's going to come back and fall on your lap again, and then it'll be the town advisory board meeting. So it's okay to participate in those, but those recommendations that you make and the next steps don't always automatically be, okay, thanks for coming tonight, we'll see you, go to the Planning Commission in 2 weeks or go to the Board of County Commissioners. You can help facilitate the process by working with neighbors and applicants to try to massage things, so when it does come to the Board of County Commissioners, they're not having 10-hour meetings hearing things from all of your different areas. So specificity, making sure that your recommendations on the rec sheets and the minutes fit. And I guess the last thing is that sometimes when you go back, it's tough when you're thinking on the fly and you're trying to keep order in a meeting and you're making the minutes have to reflect what you said, not what you thought you said, not what you wished you said, it's what you said. So be careful with your recommendations, and those minutes need to reflect accurately how it was stated, and we all know that if we got a second crack at it, that maybe it would have been a better formation of the minutes or the recommendation, but remember, take your time. It's what you said, not what you wished you said or what you wanted to say, and that all those things, if you come into those meetings prepared, it's going to make it a lot easier. Is there something for another slide?
Yeah, you got a question.
Okay, yes. From a Spring Valley Town Advisory Board member, which we're all very proud of, but go ahead.
Question for you. You mentioned community meetings, so I am an applicant.
Sure.
So I can no longer host issues meetings.
Oh, no, you can, that doesn't, because you're on a board or an advisory council, that does not change who you are. It's just another part of you at this point. What I'm cautioning against is that an item that comes before you, and you as a board see that there's some things that need to be massaged a little bit, that maybe there's some stuff that the applicant and the neighbors can work out as far as conditions and things that still might make it work, you may want to attend it, but that's not your meeting at that point. That's the neighborhood meeting, because it's going to come back to you, and then you're going to have time to comment on it. So my caution is if you go to those and you listen, because that's why we as liaisons and administrative services and everything else, from time to time, you'll see county commissioners, and I think it's great that they go to me, but we would certainly caution a commissioner from going to every one of your meetings.
So if I have host a meeting and it's on an issue, whatever going on, I just need to be mindful that this is an informative to inform the community and not really speak my thoughts or opinions about it.
Yes, because you should not, on items that are coming before you, you should not be publicly disclosing until it's in a public forum, people have an opportunity to present both sides.
But it may not be an issue yet, basically.
Yeah, no, then that's different. Anything that's agendized and people know it's before you and within your purview, I'm just cautioning that it's okay to listen, but to start stating your opinion, then people, unfortunately, will try to box you in and say, well, that's not what you said, and you might have heard something at the meeting from somebody else that enlightens you, and it's like, oh, I didn't, but then they'll hold you to your comment in a neighborhood meeting. And you don't want to have people be able to pin you down and put you in that bad spot, so it's best participating, continue to be an advocate. That's probably why you were selected for the board. I mentioned Susan. I know that she went to meetings for a number of years, and she'll be able to speak to it shortly, of sitting on the other side of the table. It's a different view. Somebody else? Okay. Is there another? Oh, how to behave. Yeah, I'm the best person in the world to be telling you this. You all know that meetings can be very personal to people. And gentlemen in the back talked about the Robert's Rules and those type of things. And I worked for Boys Town for 15 years. Boys Town has an interaction style that they teach to anybody that works at Boys Town. It is a 10-step process for any time you interact with a child. Initial praise, empathy, or affection, description of the behavior, description of how they could have changed the behavior, improved upon it, reinforcement, 10 things, everything you do. It took a while when I was a young man going through all that and thinking about, so I'm learning all these things, so it's going to help me control the kids. That's why you do this, huh? So we learn how to, no. It clicked when it was taught is that those things are to control me. any type of thing is to control my behavior. Anything you do in life is thinking, feelings, and behavior. You can come into a meeting as a town board member and be thinking about the football game that we all might be missing right now. You might be feeling hungry or tired or feel that, who's this schmuck up here talking right now? But most of you guys have been taught throughout your life you need to look forward and smile and everything else and have that behavior. But there's other things going on at the time. Your meetings, when you go there, they're going to evolve over time with the culture that you start this next Tuesday. For all intents and purposes, we are all brand new boards, brand new councils, and everything else. You, as a group, will have to hold each other accountable, but it's those behaviors, going back to Rob, we don't follow strict Robert's rules, but what we do want is that you guys, in spite of your differences, kill them with kindness. Refer things back through the chair. You're going to have people that are going to want to argue with you as a board member. They're going to want to argue back and forth with the applicant, people in the audience. You don't speak for me. You can't say, I don't agree with. The reason we have the system is to try to control those meetings, to make it functional for people, to make an environment that people feel comfortable to present. And so how you guys model that from the beginning, starting this next week on Tuesdays and Wednesdays when you have your meeting, is going to go a long way 3 months from now, 6 months from now, in establishing how those meetings are going to be run. The new chairman of the Board of County Commissioners, who was here today, she made it real clear at the meeting last week that she has some real specific expectations and did her best, I believe, to try to point some things out to citizens, which you've seen numerous times if you've been involved with this for years, of standing up and accusing a commissioner of not returning my phone calls. Your office hasn't called me back. Well, considering 3 of the commissioners had actually been working for about 2 hours at that point, to have somebody that stepped up to the microphone and say, I contacted you and you didn't get back to me is a pretty low blow for the first day, but Commissioner Kirkpatrick handled it. And I say that because when we work with the commissioners, and I talked to Commissioner Jones after the meeting about that, is that what they wanted to be able to feel comfortable with is, well, wait a second, you've been to the town board. The town boards are an extension of the commissioners. The people are being heard at all those different steps, and that the commissioners will rely upon that as they get in there longer and know that when people start to say that they haven't been heard, it's a fallacy in our area if you live in a township or in a citizen advisory council area. So follow our adjusted rules, and Steve will be here with that. But my thing with the behavior is the biggest thing is that know that people are going to be somewhat passionate about things, sometimes inappropriate, and I can go on and tell you stories. I'm not going to stay up here too long with some of the crazy stuff that people will say. But if you guys treat each other with respect, let the chair run the meeting. You can refer things, but always refer things back through the chair, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair. Try to get the audience to work back through the chair, and I believe it's going to save you a lot of grief at times. But you guys are all adults. I know many of you, and have had the privilege to work with you, and just thank you for everything you've done. It's going to be a fun journey, but Tuesday and Wednesday will get started. So I don't know if there's other slides that I need to address. Oh, I didn't even see this slide. That was unprofessional on my part. But I guess when I'm looking at that, I touched upon a team and whatnot. Clearly, you're committed to the community. Anybody that is willing to serve on a town board or a citizens advisory council, maybe one of the more difficult things would be run home and be the president of your homeowners association, because that's another thankless position that people will do in the community. You guys are committed there. There's no doubt in my mind. But the thing to keep in mind is that I touched on it earlier, is that you may have had those issues and things that passionately got you there, but remember the role that you're playing now is now you're not the advocate, or you're not the neighborhood individual, but now you're the person that's trying to make sure both sides are heard, and that it's a fair hearing, and that you're making recommendations that not only may meet the best interest of both, but that are also legally something that can be defended, and that's what the commissioners will have to deal with. And that staff is going to be there. We will have, from time to time, fortunately, we get to have planning staff that'll come. Understand that the staff member that comes to your meeting may not have been the staff member that was involved with the write-up and everything else. They certainly get briefed on it. And staff is just like you guys know, they're just another cog in the whole system. Staff looks at things from the way they've been directed from a legal standpoint. You guys are going to look at things maybe a little bit differently, more as a neighbor, and that's what's good. All those things are good. It ultimately will fall on the county commissioners, and they're the legally constituted boards throughout the county. They're the ones that are elected. They're the ones that people can put out of office. And when I said earlier to embrace your roles and know you guys are part of the system. Are they always going to follow your recommendations? No. Do they always follow the recommendations of the Planning Commission? No. But I think last year or the year before we touched upon it, the percentage is pretty high, and it's getting higher all the time because I feel of the professionalism of the boards, how you guys handle your meetings, how you're formatting your recommendations, is that you're a lot closer in many ways than you think. And lastly, and certainly don't beat me up in any of your meetings as far as staff. And then the ethics class will be coming up here closely. And for those of you that haven't been to a planning commission meeting, I encourage you to do it. Those of you that, if you haven't seen many of the Board of County Commissioners stuff, the nice thing is it's online. Watch all those things. People that are new to town boards or citizen advisory council that are maybe not sure of things, you can go listen to the whole last couple years of meetings auditorially and have an idea of what's been going on in your particular area, and just help with your confidence and how you move forward. But it was stated earlier, you didn't get on these boards to be wallflowers. Don't just come in and raise your hand and say yay or nay. Start to participate. You were selected for these boards for your opinions, and they're not going to get out there if you're not willing to talk at the meetings. But the chair runs them, the vice chair will jump in when needed. Treat each other with respect, and you'll develop that culture that people know that, hey, we're not coming into this particular board or council and getting out of line. So any questions? I know it's maybe went over, not sure what else we need to touch upon, but I will turn it over to someone who I have not had the pleasure of working with at meetings, but I do know historically was very active before coming on the board. I know Blanca speaks very highly, but more importantly than coming from a liaison, I think hearing from somebody that has sat on both sides of the table is a good thing today. So without any further ado, Susan, if you want to give them your perspective from both sides.
Okay.